Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the transit of Pluto in the eighth house. The eighth house in astrology is ruled by Pluto as well as Mars in the sign of Scorpio. It is the house that is, possibly most infamous. Maybe the 12th house can give it a run for its money, but it is a house that a lot of people think of as difficult, and certainly Pluto is no trip to the beach either. So it is definitely, for lack of a different word, an intense kind of a transit. And one of the sites that I visited called this the unconscious mind. I would say the subconscious mind. I would say the 12th house, Pisces domain, is the unconscious mind because it does involve past lives. And, we do in general get amnesia about those past lives or have faint, recall. But in the eighth house, it's the shadow self. And a shadow is something that follows a person and is a part of them at all times. And the only thing you can say about it that is not conscious is that it can be ignored. It's known on some level, but the person doesn't want to face whatever that shadow is. And to me, the shadow is simply um, trauma and other types of difficult situations that the person has been in that are unintegrated, or what I was going to say disintegrated, but that's not right, that are not integrated. And integration simply means that we accept those things that have happened as part of us and we're not disowning them, because when a person disowns them, they can become they can develop a life of their own. And the person may not even consciously realize that they're doing this. A good example of this is projection. People sometimes will say to other people things that are really true about themselves. And they're not consciously doing that. That would be gaslighting. We're talking about when people just have unresolved issues and they just are still within themselves. They're still aware that these issues exist, but they place them on somebody else. It's like blaming somebody else for something that they actually are a part of or that they believe in at a deeper level. And so the the planet Pluto is a planet that we associate with transformation. Death is part of the eighth house, so you could say that death is a part of Pluto, although Mars also, because Mars can be violence and things like that. I suppose, Mars is the god of war, and certainly death is a part of war, so it's not far from Mars either. But the issue of death is like the ultimate transformation. However, there are different types of deaths in the form of endings. And that can be what the eighth house represents as well. These other types of endings that lead to transformation, new beginnings, and things of that nature. So when we talk about Pluto, we're looking at how does the person experience transformation. For instance, if it's in the first house, it might even be through bodily transformation. Or the person decides to change the way that they present themselves to other people. Maybe it's a combination of both appearance and mannerisms or behaviors. And I have read that when Pluto goes into a particular house, that can set off some kind of, I don't know if you'd call it like a crisis, that force the person to have to address the issue with the house in question. And that means that the person is going to transform from that place of crisis, because there has to be a catalyst. These transits have to have some kind of influence that is, maybe at first rather strong, because remember that Pluto is a generational planet, so it's lasting for sometimes, in the case of Aquarius, it's going to last for 20 years. So, but I was looking at the transit of Pluto in Sagittarius, and it was 13 years. So it does vary from whatever transit is currently happening. But it is a generational planet for sure. So the eighth house is known for being connected to the occult. And this is also, I mean, to me, astrology isn't really the occult, but that's what they say. Astrology, the tarot, and I would say other metaphysical issues. And this is about, and if we look at the word metaphysical, meta means beyond the physical. And so anything that is in a similar vein, but it is dealing with the secrets of the universe. The ninth house, the adjacent house ruled by Sagittarius, is more in an overt way the kind of the mainstream organized religions that are very open and regimented. They have their own set of dogma, the do's and don'ts, the belief systems. That's what ninth house represents, our belief systems, philosophical frameworks. The eighth house is, to me, more open-ended, even though they may have their own, like the mystery schools. They might have their own studies, but to me, it's more geared towards the individual and their individual spiritual path, and not really promoted to the masses, because it's kind of the esoteric type of information. And but the other thing that's interesting about the eighth house is that it is a money house, believe it or not. It is shared resources, and it is other people's money. So in shared resources, we could speak about husband and wife, or a committed partnership. Let's put it that way. The shared money in that partnership. We could talk about in a family system. So, inheritance are connected to the eighth house. And other people's money, it can even be like money that you earn that isn't part of, that you're not earning, they say, by the sweat of your own brow. So if you have investments and you get dividends, that could be eighth house, and other similar types of funds. Like, I was going to say like trust funds. But see, when it comes to things like that, there can be power struggles, and that is the eighth house as well. So suffice it to say, when Pluto is in its own domain, you can find that one of these or more than one of these themes emerges for you during this time. It might start slowly, it might not seem like a big deal, but then it kind of comes to that crescendo at some point. Like, for instance, let's say you have married during this transit, or merged a house, joined a household with your partner. So even if you're not married, but you're part of the same household, and you have to learn to merge your finances. Even if you keep separate bank accounts, I mean, that might be one of the big bones of contention that comes up, or something, where you have to decide whether or not you want to do some of these things. And that can create conflict with that partner because either they want to merge finances and you don't, or they don't want to and you do. Also, spending habits of another person that can create the desire to control, even if the person doesn't want to really dominate somebody. It may trigger them to see somebody spending money in the household that they feel is a waste or, somehow excessive. Even if each person keeps their own bank account and they go in half and half on the bills, some people just have that very strong emotional connection with money, and it just triggers them to see other people and how they deal with money when they don't agree with that way of doing so. But just in general, any kind of power struggles, that can certainly be what is going on. And who knows, maybe it's more than one person in your life, because ultimately it always comes back to ourselves. So these power struggles, in a way, you could say that they're meant to help us to find our own to grow our own backbone and find our own voice, so that we're not just being dominated by other people, but we also believe that we are responsible for ourselves. Some people feel like they don't have a choice, like they have to be dominated by someone. And it's not necessarily even true. So it's very interesting how this may play out for some people. I do feel that with this particular transit, this could be for some people amazing growth, because you may decide when Pluto is in the 8th house to go into psychotherapy. One reason is because things may come up for you from that subconscious, or if you want to look at it as unconscious mind, that you have repressed. So there's a term, repressed memories, that speaks to trauma that the body or the mind, whatever you want to call it, the psyche, has decided to tamp down or suppress because it's too painful to deal with head on. And while sometimes that can lead to a lot of to a crisis point where the person is forced to kind of like, they're flooded with these images or things that had happened, it ultimately can lead to healing. So the mind or the psyche will tend to begin to remember when it's safe to do so. I mean, sometimes this happens because of some kind of trigger that, sets off the suppressed memory. And I realized at some point that this is really what shadow work is sometimes for people, is psychotherapy. But it would have to be with somebody that is actually going into these areas, not just somebody that is looking at the narrative, but they're really diving deep, because the 8th house is very deep. So that's where the intensity comes in, because it can be a lot. And I'm not saying this is going to be true for everybody. For some people, they may be confronted with the need to step into their personal power. Maybe you have given away your power way too long, and now you have to find it within yourself to stand up for yourself for some reason. Because this is the house of death, and I'm talking about physical death now, it might be that there is an important death that happens during this transit and that greatly transforms you. Now, this will not happen for everyone. I'm still trying to find out when Pluto transited my eighth house, but it did transit it, and I'm not quite sure that. Well, interestingly enough, I went back and looked, and yes, I did have Pluto in the eighth house when I had a significant death. And there's a poem by Dylan Thomas called Refusal to Mourn a Child Burned in a Fire or something like that. And the last line of the poem is, after the first death, there is no other. And I always thought about that line when I thought about this death of a friend. And, you know, Dylan Thomas was a Scorpio. And so the idea of death is very much a part of the eighth house, Scorpio, Pluto. And so, yeah, I mean, this could happen, but don't think that this will be true for everybody. But it was incredibly transformative for me because it 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 really brought home the idea of how life is so, transitory. Even if you know it intellectually, until you experience something like that, it can be very hard. It can be very, very abstract. Expect a change, but I think that the change is going to be that it deepens you. If you emerge from this transit and you are still rather superficial, then I don't know what to tell you, because all it takes is for some profound experiences to occur for people to approach life from a much more deeper perspective. And so everything becomes imbued with meaning. I think that's what the eighth house really imparts upon us as a whole. But when Pluto is there, it's that profundity, that profound quality of life. And that is what really, to me, makes life meaningful, because there's so much trying to siphon off our energy from a superficial superficial angles, done by design, I feel, so that we get off track and we don't understand exactly what the meaning of life is. And I feel like a lot of people who go through this transit consciously, if you know that Pluto has recently entered, is currently there, or is about to enter your eighth house, and of course you would have to look at your chart to see exactly when that's going to occur, because it's not going to happen to everyone at the same time. And it depends on what degree you have of the sign that Pluto is in. Like, as I record this, Pluto is in Aquarius. And, the interesting thing, whoa, that's pretty deep. I just recorded this on May 2nd, 2024, and Pluto is going retrograde in Aquarius. So what a day to record this video. And yeah, Pluto is going to go back into Capricorn briefly between, I think it's like September and November of 2024. And then for the next 20 years, we'll be in the sign of Aquarius. So I'm confident, since that's a long time, that, we'll see about YouTube and everything in 20 years from now. But yeah, so a lot of people that are having it, who have Aquarius in the eighth house, at some point you're going to be touched by Pluto there. And so anyway, this is the house of secrets, and Pluto is really good at ferreting out secrets. There's a saying, you're only as sick as your secrets. So if you are somebody who feels kind of burdened by carrying a lot of emotional baggage that is connected to shame, sometimes deep shame, this is going to be a liberating experience for you if you play your cards right, actually, because, nobody can ever guarantee if any of these things are going to occur for someone while this transit is going on. But if you are conscious about what this house represents, even if you don't necessarily believe that the astrological transits always bring what they do, you can consciously pursue it too. And that can involve, if there's things that you have been holding on to, you can consult a therapist, an energy healer, people, like a shaman, any kind of person who can help you to transmute that energy and that personal alchemy that the eighth house represents. Pluto is right there and can help to uh, turn it into something positive. I would even say, because this is a water house, the eighth house, that anyone who has talent creatively, and most people do in one way or the other, but you can take some of those things and you can turn it into very powerful art. Also, this is the house of the secrets of the universe. So anything that we consider the occult and astrology and the tarot are part of that, but also metaphysical studies, studies about life after death. All of these things can be very potent for you, empowering for you, and in some cases, you may even train to be a shaman. But this is something that just occurred to me. I mean, in terms of career uh, paths, maybe it has to do with the mortuary sciences or whatever. I actually met somebody that was studying that to become an undertaker. No, that's not what they call it. A funeral director, probably. I think an undertaker is in the cemetery. Yeah, something like a funeral director, and yeah, the mortuary sciences. So that's more of what I would call the mundane aspect of the eighth house, because it's not really, it's kind of like the business of dying. But when we talk about it from a more metaphysical um, aspect, to me the eighth house is about channeling. So that can mean getting in touch with the dead. If you have that particular gift, you might be able to do that. And that would be the time. Maybe something will happen organically to make that happen, or you may actually take on some kind of course of studies to be able to learn how to channel, learn how to safely channel, and, the ins and outs of that kind of occult practice. Also, automatic writing is a form of channeling, I would say, and that might be something that you find that's how you tap into this other dimension. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of different practices that are connected to the occult. In terms of personal relationships, the eighth house is the house of intimacy. Um, I mentioned about finances, about shared resources. So you could say when this is the house of merging. So it is one of the houses of sex. When we use the word intimacy, some people immediately go to sex, which makes sense. But the ultimate intimacy, as far as I'm concerned, is emotional intimacy, or you could even say spiritual intimacy. rather than physical intimacy. And the way that this can come about is that a person can bare their soul to another person. The seventh house, to me, is kind of the bells and whistles of couple uh, relationship. I was going to say coupleship, relationship. So the marriage where the people are having a party, they're signing a document, or if you're moving in with someone and you're like together in that sense. But just because you live with somebody doesn't mean that you're necessarily that intimate with them. You can have a rather superficial relationship with somebody and it's not at the level that you are looking for. So this is one of the reasons why I believe that it's so important to approach things from wanting to have depth in your relationships. Because otherwise, it's just like it's skimming the surface of life. And so if you are somebody who has a history of kind of doing that, skimming the surface, you may find that this is a very important transit of opening yourself up to deeper intimacy in relationships. And given the fact that Pluto has been through your seventh house of relationships, that may have uh, ended a marriage or the equivalent type of relationship, and you're almost like forced to address this. And you may, if you really want to do that, it may start, it probably will start with yourself from the standpoint of looking at why you ever were having a superficial relationship to begin with, because there might have been some particular reason. Maybe you do come from a background of trauma and getting close to somebody is a scary prospect, and it's easier to get to kind of join forces with somebody who is also running away from intimacy. And so when a person gets involved with somebody, for instance, who's a serial cheater, you could say that they are almost choosing somebody deliberately who they know will never really commit, and therefore they don't have to be frightened by a deep relationship. It's funny how that works, because some people can swear up and down and say, I didn't know that this person was like that. And maybe that's true on the conscious level, but subconsciously or unconsciously, there's something about a person who may cheat. There might be other kinds of, vibes that such a person gives off that attract the other person to them. And like I said, I mean, the person who's cheating is probably wounded as well. And they're probably terrified of, going deep with somebody too. So let's see if there's anything else that I wanted to speak on. Well, just to reiterate about taboos, or I don't know if I mentioned that word, but I was talking about shame, and a similar theme is like taboos. So the eighth house can represent, like I said, secrets, but also taboos, things that are frowned upon in society, and that we tend to think, we judge and that sort of thing. So being able to face some of these difficult topics, whether there's something within yourself that is participating in a taboo subject, or you find out about somebody else who's doing so. I see this a lot, just like on social media, that people are super judgmental, when there's a news story and there's something really, intensely twisted that is going on, that is exposed, and the people that just completely judge it, and they have to, put their 2 cents in about how disgusting it is and how horrible it is. And I sense a lot of shame within people. Maybe they are doing those things themselves, or they know somebody in their life, maybe a family member who's doing them, and they need to kind of get that out of, or there's it triggers something within themselves about something shameful that they're carrying within themselves. So this is really eighth house stuff. And um you know the word that just came into my mind is exorcism. We always think of like the demonically possessed, right? And yet, just being, a person in this world, it's so easy to kind of come across very difficult, dark topics, which the eighth house is all about. And sometimes it feels like we can really feel that darkness. And sometimes it even reminds us of something that we experienced, whether we chose consciously to experience it or not. Maybe it was something that was done to us that we did not consciously ask for. So we can, find ourselves in that pattern of being disgusted, or, whatever you want to call it, ashamed. And yet there's a liberation that comes from being able to fully excavate this. That's the essence of shadow work, in my opinion, is that so we can love ourselves regardless. Because it's easy, and this goes for other people as well. It's easy to love other people when they are doing all the right things, or it's easy to love ourselves when we are on point, on task. But when we deviate from what we really expect for ourselves, that's when the shame can come in. And when you can love yourself through that shame and really kind of heal yourself fully, that's shadow work being completed and being able to transcend it. And so hopefully, as you go through this transit, you will remember what I said. And if you encounter something that's very difficult, and this could be some revelation that comes into your life, that you're able to stare it in the face, that you're not running away from it because it's difficult. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.